Well, it has just gone 1800 GMT. I'm Nastasia Tay. You're watching Al Jazeera. We are covering breaking news out of the Lebanese capital, Beirut, where the Israeli military says it has carried out a targeted attack in retaliation for Saturday's rocket attack on the occupied Golan Heights. Now, this happened in the southern suburb of Harak. It's a known stronghold of the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. The explosion, we understand, happened near Hezbollah's Shura Council, which is the group's central decision-making authority. Sources close to Hezbollah are saying that 2 people have been killed. We are trying to independently confirm that information for you. Israel's army says that this Beirut strike targeted the Hezbollah commander they believe responsible for the occupied Golan Heights attack. Hezbollah, though, has repeatedly denied any involvement in that. Well, in a statement, the Israeli army has said it targeted in Beirut the commander responsible for the murder of the children in Majd al-Shams and killed many Israeli civilians. At this point, there is no change in the directives of the Home Front Command. If there are any changes, we will update. Well, let's bring in Ali Hashem. He joins me now on the phone from Beirut. He is in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital, very close to the site of the explosion. Ali, you were telling me that you were seeing the scene there, and essentially a building has collapsed. Talk us through what's surrounding you right now.
Well, now I'm outside this area, but I can say that, yes, as we said, the building has collapsed. As we know now that there are 2 casualties, at least one of them is a woman that was taken to a nearby hospital. Several people also injured. As the Israelis said, this was an assassination attempt. Now, we don't know whether this was conducted by a drone or F-35, because in the past, just a few months ago, if we go back to January, Israel assassinated Saleh al-Aruri, the deputy Politburo chief of Hamas, by using these advanced warplanes. So for now, we don't know what was used in this attack. Also, there's no indication whether the assassination attempt, the reported assassination attempt on Fuad Shukr, who is also known as Mohsen Shukr, was successful or not. But the significance of this targeting is that this man, Mohsen Shukr or Fuad Shukr, was among the top echelon of Hezbollah's leadership. He's probably among maybe the most senior commander currently in Hezbollah. He's one of the historic commanders of Hezbollah, just like in the past Imad Mughniyeh or Mustafa Badruddin, who were assassinated in the past years in Syria. Now, how this is going to change the rules of engagement, or whether this is going to change the rules of engagement that are updated day by day, and now we can say they are updated hour by hour. This is the big question. How is Hezbollah going to deal with this situation, whereas Israel conducted an assassination hitting a military commander? It did not hit a civilian area, a civilian target. This is going to put Hezbollah in front of a lot of questions, and probably the decision makers in Hezbollah will have to take a decision how to retaliate to this Israeli attack, especially that the attack is in Beirut's southern suburb. Of course, all the equations before the 7th of October can't be taken into consideration. Right now, there are new equations. There are also new decision-making processes. And at the end, there are a lot of liabilities and there are a lot of repercussions if Hezbollah is going, because in the past, Hezbollah's Secretary General was saying if they hit the southern suburb, then Tel Aviv is going to be hit. Probably this is not the case anymore now, because we saw that when Aruri was killed in the southern suburb, Hezbollah attacked an Israeli advanced air base in Miron. Now, probably with the killing, or if the assassination attempt on Fuad Shukr per the Israelis, because till the moment we don't have any confirmation from Hezbollah whether Fuad Shukr was there, whether Fuad Shukr was injured or Fuad Shukr was killed. These are all issues to take into consideration in weighing how Hezbollah is going to react, because any result of this assassination attempt is going to have a different scenario. If he's killed, there is a different scenario. Mm-hmm. If he survived, then Hezbollah is going to retaliate for the targeting and not for the killing. So these are all issues to take into consideration. But if we have to take the picture in general, into the context of what's been happening in the past a few days, this is a new phase. We're starting a new phase in this confrontation. Israel has been trying as much as possible to disconnect the front in Lebanon from the front in Gaza, because Hezbollah has been saying on several occasions, this is a support front. What Israel is trying to do is trying to disconnect the two fronts in a way to find a solution, whether a military solution or a diplomatic solution. But Hezbollah is refusing that and saying that without a ceasefire in Gaza, they're not going to stop the support front from Lebanon.
Well, Ali, just in the last 8 minutes or so, Russia has said that they condemn the strikes that have taken place in Lebanon. They're describing them as a flagrant violation of international law. Obviously, there are a number of foreign powers here who've been very, very concerned about any kind of escalation that could result in a broader regional conflict. Interesting, though, as you say, Hezbollah's weighing up its options right now. And there was that statement that we got from the Israeli military saying that there is no change in the directives of the Home Front Command. So a signal there that essentially they don't necessarily want to change the rules of engagement. But in deciding whether or not to escalate this even further, let me ask you then, Ali, how much are foreign powers weighing in on Hezbollah's decision-making at the moment? And when I say foreign powers, I'm particularly thinking here about Iran.
Well, probably this moment is a decisive moment for Hezbollah, because the big question here, and we can have Iran also on the umbrella, is the deterrence. The question of deterrence. This is the main issue in this confrontation. And given the fact that deterrence between the two sides, between Israel and Hezbollah, is very high, that's one of the reasons why this frontier in Lebanon hasn't gone into an all-out war, because both sides have a lot of calculation. It's actually given the fact each movement is being studied by both sides. Now, with respect to Iran, I believe Iran and Hezbollah are both on the same page at the moment. So the decision-making process is kind of unified. So Hezbollah wouldn't go for a decision without the Iranians, and the Iranians wouldn't impose a decision on Hezbollah without taking Hezbollah's calculations into consideration, because Hezbollah is the one on the ground, and they understand what's happening. And if the deterrence is shaking, this is going to have dire implications on the front in Lebanon and on the organization itself.
Ali Hashem there with the very latest for us, reporting from the Lebanese capital, Beirut, from the southern suburbs, where that strike has literally just taken place in the last hour or so. Ali, thank you very much. Let's now bring in Ori Goldberg. He's an Israeli political commentator, and he joins me now from Tel Aviv. Ori, we've been talking about the potential for serious escalation all week, especially since Saturday. Do you consider this to be that?
No, I really don't. I think it is exactly more of the same. It is the Israeli playbook. And I'll do you one further. I think that by targeting and trying to assassinate the commander Israel holds responsible for the attack on Majd al-Shams, Israel is actually saying to Hezbollah, we're willing to let you enjoy the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this was a one-man operation. Maybe you didn't actually mean it. We're pulling a Hezbollah here. We're going exactly tit for tat. And that's it as far as we're concerned. I doubt Hezbollah will rise to the quote-unquote challenge that Israel is placing here. I don't think Hezbollah enjoys playing chicken with Israel, so I don't think this is a trigger for serious escalation.
In terms of how Israel is viewing this front, I'm curious about public opinion there. Obviously, there's a war ongoing in Gaza that has become highly controversial for the Netanyahu government. How do Israelis feel about potentially deepening engagement on another front in the north?
Well, Israelis feel several conflicting and sometimes contradictory things with regard to the war in Lebanon. It's considered to be the most immediate solution to the profound political problem of repatriating the Israeli citizens who were hastily evacuated from the north of Israel after October 7th. Israel is stuck. It doesn't really know what to do and how to encourage these citizens to return home. Some of them have no choice, but others are sticking it out, hoping for a war. It is a path of redemption to some extent for the IDF that has failed spectacularly in Gaza. But it is also a formidable challenge, probably too formidable, because the IDF is vastly overextended and cannot expect to fight a ground war in Lebanon and ultimately win. So Israelis, for them, for us, war with Hezbollah is always on the table, but I cannot think of a less propitious time for such a war. Israel is torn. Israel is imploding. Israel is in the midst of probably the most severe domestic crisis it has ever experienced. A war with Lebanon could perhaps rally Israelis around the flag, but its effects would be disastrous and they would be almost immediately disastrous. So I think Israelis will talk about the importance of the war, the relevance of the war, the need for a war, but most Israelis I know really profoundly don't want a war with Lebanon.
Ori, I want to ask you about the incident that Israel is saying triggered this response, which is what Israel was saying was a rocket attack in Majd al-Shams on Saturday that killed 12 people, many of whom were children, on a football pitch. Now, we've heard lots of rhetoric from the Israeli government. Netanyahu himself went up there and claimed that this was a direct attack on Israel. Yet this is an area that's been occupied by Israel. These are Syrian communities. And in fact, when Netanyahu himself went up there, he was told that he wasn't welcome and he was asked by many community members to leave. How does Israel view the occupied Golan Heights and actually what happened on Saturday? Do Israelis view that as being a direct attack on Israeli citizens?
Well, that's a complicated question. Israelis view the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel. Remember that according to Israeli law, the Golan was annexed to Israel and is now part of Israel, even if that is not recognized by international law. Israelis are aware that some Druze in the Golan see themselves as Syrian, but over the last several years, these Druze communities have undergone a rapprochement of sorts with the Israeli state. The relationship is still tense, but it is less tense than it was. And I think the reaction to Netanyahu's visit to Majd al-Shams is not so much because of a rejection of Israel as much as it is because of a sense of abandonment by these Druze and because of anger that, in my opinion, is very much justified. Israel does not do everything it can to address the grievances of these Druze. It does not treat them as citizens. They are discriminated against most prominently by our basic law of nationality, which sets Jews above everybody else in this country, including the Druze. So I think the reaction was very much anger, both at the Israeli state's incompetence and also at the Israeli state's lack of response after this horrific attack. I wouldn't read too much into the Syrianness of the Golan or the Israeliness of the response. The Druze know exactly how the state of Israel treats them. Right now, it's very clear to them, I think, hence the anger, that they're used as a prop for the warmongers in the governing Israeli coalition.
Ori, you talked about Israel now living through its greatest domestic crisis ever. And I'm curious about how all of this is being perceived in terms of this engagement with Hezbollah within the context of what's happening right now in Gaza. There are talks taking place in Cairo. There is a proposal on the table to essentially bring about a ceasefire. Is there a concern that all of this is peripheral and could actually put that process into jeopardy?
Well, there's a concern about potential war with Hezbollah, but remember that the war with Hezbollah and the war with Lebanon is something that Israelis have experienced quite a few times over the last several decades. So this war with Lebanon is, again, at times perceived as a potential necessity, at times perceived as a hindrance or as some sort of less important series of events when compared with what's happening in Gaza. Mostly the issue with Lebanon is a political one. There's a consensus that Hezbollah is a real enemy, but there's also a consensus that a war is a bad thing. So I think most Israelis, when they are thinking about the domestic crisis that Israel is experiencing, I think most of their attention is invested in Gaza and in the implications of the situation in Gaza on Israeli society, on Israeli politics, the war with Lebanon is, again, more a matter of overt consensus. I think most Israelis assume Israel will have to go to war with Hezbollah at some point, just as most Israelis right now really don't want a war with Hezbollah, not because they are in favor of a peaceful resolution necessarily, but because they think they have bigger, much more urgent fish to fry at the moment.
Ori Goldberg, then, Israeli political commentator, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much, Ori. We really appreciate your contribution at this very volatile time. Thanks. We are getting some more news just in. The head of the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah's operations center, Muhsin Shakur, has reportedly survived what they're describing as an Israeli strike on the southern suburbs of Beirut aimed at killing him on Tuesday. Two senior security sources have told the Reuters news agency. Well, let's just recap the breaking news we've been covering if you're just joining us now here on Al Jazeera. So just before 1700 GMT, an explosion was heard in a southern Beirut suburb. The Israeli army then announced it had carried out what it described as a targeted attack on a commander of the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah. Now, they've said that he was responsible, they hold him responsible for that rocket attack on the occupied Golan Heights on Saturday, which hit a football field. 12 people were killed. Hezbollah has denied, though, having any involvement.